I didn't even check my makeup. I hope it's still on my face.
Oh, no, you look great.
Great.
You look great, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
I should have looked in the
Whenever
mirror. Awesome. A couple of years ago, I moved out to Redding, California in one of the just absolute hardest seasons of my life, probably the worst condition I've ever been in, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. I was battling PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, after a really rough period of missions inside an active conflict zone in Africa. After being at Bethel for a little over a month, someone danced over me and I was miraculously healed. And just a few months after that, I was invited to tell that testimony at Jesus Awakening. I was able to share that testimony, and how interesting it was that after I finished and just prayed for people to have hope and be encouraged, a young girl came up into my prayer line, and she happened to be from the very nation and the very territory that I had come out of. And I just began to weep and cry because I'd been praying this prayer daily, that God would raise up nationals that would be leaders and agents of change in their nation. And as I was standing before this girl who came up to me from prayer, and she told me she was from this nation, I began to cry because the Lord spoke to me and said, "This is the answer to your prayer." And later that night, it was a service where just packed out, tons of people, and we began to engage in worship and just an incredible time. And Blaine Cook was ministering, and he actually called this young lady up to the stage, and he began to prophesy over her the very things that I had been declaring and praying for in that nation, that she would be an agent of change, that she would change her nation. And at that moment, God just hit her. The power of God hit her, knocked her to the ground. And at the same time, as I was standing in the back, the power of God hit me to the ground. And I had one of the most powerful encounters of my life with the tangible presence of God, so much so that my abs were actually sore for 7 days after the conference from just the amount of the power of God that was coming into my body. And that evening, after the encounter, I sat with this young girl, and we actually began to pray for her nation. And we prayed for a guy that I know on staff with a ministry who had actually been taken by rebels in her country. And we got word the next day that that man had actually been released, and we believed it was about the exact same time that we had been praying together. And so it was a huge encounter for me personally. I believe it was a huge encounter for this young lady. It was a moment where we saw God just shining on conflict zones and wanting to do something in the conflict zones of the world to start bringing peace and show that He's the God of the nations, that He reigns on the throne no matter what's going on, even today, no matter what's going on in Iraq, no matter how strong ISIS may look. Our God, the King of Kings, Jesus Christ, He reigns on the throne, and He is very much alive and active, and we can have hope that He is moving in the nations.